Not so typical crazy ex-boyfriend. I made a throwaway, but I am an avid lurker of the subreddit. I normally don't like to think about this incident, but after partaking in some liquid courage, I think I am ready to share this. This is a long one, so hold on to your panties. Context: I'm a female living in the Midwest and was 21 years old at the time this happened. I dated Stan for 3 years. I met Stan in high school and he seemed pretty normal then. We started dating shortly after meeting, and 2 weeks before he was due to ship off to basic training for the army. Over the entirety of our relationship, I maybe saw Stan in person 6 months total. Most of our relationship was letters, phone calls, and online correspondence. I first noticed Stan had issues when 4 days into our relationship, he told me he loved me. Being young and stupid, I thought it was destiny. Over the months, he began saying things like, "I love you, my life would end without you," to "I need you, I would kill myself if we broke up." He started experiencing depression and took medications, resulting in violent mood swings and panic attacks. This mental instability, coupled with his heavy drinking and self-inflicted social isolation, save for myself and his mother, made for one hell of a shitstorm on the horizon. Years passed and I grew exhausted of caring for his fragile psyche, and tired of waiting for his 4 years in the army to end, I broke up with him. That's when my personal hell began. First it was the phone calls. I ignored them after a while, and after the first hour, then the voicemails, starting with "I love you, please come back to me," and morphing into "You fat cow, you deserve to die." Then the text messages and online abuse. He defaced my Facebook, slanging whore and slut on everything he could, and posting fabricated statuses about his sexual deviance and other things I was to have done. Things quieted down for a few days after I blocked him, and tried to salvage what I could online. I received one last voicemail from him. It started with silence, and then there was a single gunshot, followed by 5 minutes of silence after that. My stomach dropped. Had he killed himself? Did I cause this? I started crying. I didn't want to believe it. I got a text from him 10 minutes after saying he hoped the voicemail taught me a lesson, and that I am going to hell for what I was putting him through. There were a few minor incidences after that, of changed phone number and a threat of protective order before I thought this whole thing was behind me. Luckily, I had the support of friends and family throughout the whole ordeal. Then I came back to college from winter break. I pulled into the driveway of my house I share with 2 other roommates. I was the first one back, seeing that there were no footprints in the fresh snow. I get to the front door and see that it's ajar. I started shaking. I should have just stopped right then and called the police, but I wasn't thinking clearly in my panic. I reached into my purse and pulled out my pistol I carry for self-defense. I chambered around, ready for it to fire. That movement was the scariest thing I've ever done. I never pulled my gun out with deadly intent, but I did not know what was on the other side of that door. I opened it quickly with my gun raised, empty. I checked the bedrooms and closets of my roommates and the living area, leaving my room for last. The moments leading up to when I went around the corner of the doorway were sickening. My room was empty. The relief was so overwhelming. I started sobbing. I immediately called the police and they sent someone over within the hour. I used that time to tally the damage. My room was destroyed. My roommates' rooms were fine. Expensive electronics all over the house left untouched, but my room had clearly been ransacked. Very personal belongings had been taken. Perfume Stan had bought me, jewelry, a pair of high heels, paintings I had done, my camera, my beloved satchel covered in patches that I collected in my travels, and other odds and ends. The most disturbing part was that all the hiding places I usually leave my gun when I am on campus in class are gone though. Places unusual for a cat burglar to search. After filing a report with the police, I got all the locks checked and redone and told everyone of my suspicions. I never did tell the police that I thought it was Stan, but I never heard from him again. Although he lives near my hometown, I make a habit of never going anywhere I could possibly see him. I can only imagine what horrors he would have done if he had gotten a hold of a gun registered in my name. I have since moved out of that house, and am much more careful with who I associate with, and I think that in the end, I came out smarter. Well, hope you enjoyed, and thanks for reading. My boyfriend's ex is batshit crazy. This girl will not leave us alone. It started right when we started dating about a year ago. We have known each other for about 6 years, and while he was dating her, She actually asked him who he wanted to date if he wasn't with her, and he said me. Since then, she has had it out for us. He broke up with her for multiple reasons that I won't elaborate on, but it was not a good breakup and they do not communicate. First incident. The first time I came over to his parents' house, she keyed his car. Although there was no proof it was her, the neighbor saw who did it and it fit her description perfectly. Fast forward 2 months and someone using a texting app started texting me on my birthday, saying that they fucked my boyfriend and it wasn't good, blah blah blah. The thing about this is, I'm with my boyfriend almost literally 24/7. Not only would he not have the time to cheat, I would know because his phone never goes off, and he doesn't really text all that much anyways. I did question him anyways, and I obviously believe he didn't do anything. Fast forward to Thanksgiving, same type of text started appearing on my phone still. No way he could have been cheating. Not only do we have a really good, really trusting relationship, but we also spend all of our time together. Fast forward to Christmas. Someone threatens me over the same texting app that they're going to key my truck and his convertible because he hurt her so badly. Now, in between the first two events, my boyfriend got his old job back at a phone company. Lo and behold, the next day, this girl gets a job there. He immediately quits, and she gets another job less than a block away from his house. I need advice as to what the fuck I can do to make this stop. Creepy first date. This is the first time I've ever posted in Let's Not Meet. I keep reading all these dating horror stories, and it being Valentine's Day and all, it had me recall a nearly forgotten first date with a guy my friend Mark fixed me up with. I known the guy a little because he worked with my friend at a local music store. He seemed cool and he was actually pretty good looking. The first time we met was at an ICP concert and we had all attended. The guy who we'll call Mike was pretty normal on the surface, and through Mark got my number and called me. We went out on a date, and as the night drew on, he asked if I minded if we just hang out at the local park and chat, because we had been at a super busy loud bar that had a band playing. I was 19 years old and highly stupid back then, so I agreed to it. It was in the summertime, and wasn't yet dark, so I wasn't thinking it seemed weird. As we were chatting, he leans in and kisses me, and I look around realizing it had gone really dark. I'm in heaven because at this point, he hasn't given me any reason to think he's a creeper. We had a great night. He was charming and funny, and we had a ton in common. Then after our first kiss, he gets his creepy grin. He looks out the window, then says to me, "I'm taking you in those woods, and we're gonna have a really good time." I kinda not laugh a bit nervously because at the time, I hadn't yet lost my virginity. I tell him I'd rather just stay in the car. He gets weird and angry, and it's like he's two people. Why can't we just go into the woods? I promise I won't rape and kill you. By now, he's trying to laugh it off, but I got incredibly creeped out. I tried to play it off like I'm not ready to run away. I should have been more creeped out than I was, but I was so naive. It creeps me out writing this, to be honest. He looks at me again and leans back in his seat and begins to start fake whining. "Oh, come on. Let me take you into those woods. It'll be fun." I'm having none of this and starts getting mad, and I'm telling him I'm ready to go home. I finally talk him into just taking me home. He was oddly quiet the rest of the drive home, and then as he gets to my house, he proceeds to apologize profusely about it. I heard later from my friend Mark that he said I was a tease. When I told my friend about what happened, he stopped talking to Mike, said that he had heard he could be kind of a sex maniac, you know? How about borderline psycho? So, guy I went on a creepy first date with, let's never ever meet again. My dad's ex. I am writing this because of a particular person that gives me anxiety and flashbacks to one of the most horrific nights of my life. She, to this very, very day, tries to contact me on every type of social media and doesn't get the hint that I don't want her in my life. This person is my dad's ex-girlfriend. I'll call her Jessica for the rest of this story. Some background information on her. She apparently was a friend of my dad's in high school and rekindled some sort of relationship between them. My parents are divorced, and at the time of this story, I wasn't allowed to contact my own mother for legal reasons, so I was in my father's care. My dad is a very emotionally abusive, and we never talked, or so much did anything but scream and fight at each other. He wasn't father of the year, and would leave me at home for hours at a time. He also did this to his girlfriend, Jessica. Jessica wasn't the sweetest person either. She had this attitude about her that screamed, "I'm better than you," and that she was the hottest woman in the whole entire world, even though she looked plain. She would constantly start drama with the other housewives in the neighborhood and gossip about them. Some days she was a nice person, but others, she was just as loathsome as my father. She and my dad would constantly fight over the way the other treated them. I didn't pay attention to any of it, but it would have all eventually come to a boil. It was the week of my 16th birthday. My father was in California to deliver some person's horses for a horse show, so he couldn't be there. So I was left with Jessica, the dogs, and my bird. On Friday, the day he would be coming back, I was fiddling with one of my presents, and it was becoming late into the nights. I was in my bedroom passing the time until I heard rustling noises coming from my dad's room, and then weird groaning, screaming noises. I was legitimately worried because those noises were coming from Jessica, and I thought she had gotten hurt. What I didn't know, however, was that she had been drinking. She then started screaming like a fucking banshee, and I was afraid to go near that room, so I called out, "Hey Jessica, are you alright in there? Do you need anything?" Apparently that was an invitation for her to come running at me, so here I was, a defenseless girl, facing off against a 50-year-old woman. She started hitting me and trying to scratch at me. I managed to grab her wrist and try to get her to tell me what she was doing. She looked at me dead in the face, and with a low, cold voice she said, "I'm going to fucking kill you." I had enough. I pushed her off of me and raced into my bedroom, locking the door. I didn't realize it was at the time that I should have called the cops, but I just prayed for my father to get home soon. Finally, as if God answered my prayers, I heard my father coming through the door. He must have felt the atmosphere in the air because he called out, "What the hell is going on?" I came rushing out in tears, telling her that it was Jessica, that she came out like a madman, slapping me and threatening to kill me. I was shaking and terrified. I screamed, "I want her out of this house." I was truly afraid. He just stormed past me and up the stairs to their room. I don't remember much, but I assume she tried to blame it on me, like I was the one that attacked her. All I can remember is that the cops weren't called and we just went to bed. That, however, isn't the end of the story. The next morning, she came into my room as I was watching TV, asking for forgiveness, acting as if we just had a girl spat. Then just her telling me she wanted to fucking kill me? I told her no, but Dad of course demanded I forgive her or else. So I did, which would usher in the behavior of her doing horrible things to me, and act like it had been nothing. Obviously, she and my father broke up and went on their separate ways. She tried to keep in touch with me, and I was nice to her out of politeness. It wasn't until I was in my freshman year in college that she would start up again. I did have a Facebook at the time, but I never did anything about it because I absolutely hate Facebook, and it was my first 2 weeks of school. I was busy and could barely check it, you know? When I did check it, I received a nasty childish message from her, all because I didn't accept her friend request. She proceeded to tell me that I was just as nasty and immature as my father, that he and I used her as a slave, even though I was her bitching buddy, as she complained about my father and all the other women in the neighborhood. Also, what struck a note was, she said that if it wasn't for her, then I wouldn't have been in college. Last time I checked, all she did was tell me the school's name. I did the rest myself. She even called me in the middle of my drawing 1 class just to bitch at me, so I proceeded to email her, telling her to never contact me again, and never contact my father again either, that I didn't appreciate her immaturity, and that I was only nice to her because of my father. Other than that, I never wanted anything to do with her. Since that message, for 2 years she tried contacting me on social media, acting as if nothing had happened, and that we were just good friends, even emailing her again to leave me alone, and she said that I was being crazy. I had since got in contact with my biological mother and told her all of this. She just flipped and told me that if she contacted me again, she will threaten her with a lawsuit. Then one day, just a few weeks ago, I was on YouTube, and I got a message. I'm not a popular YouTuber, I just use it to watch videos. Lo and behold, it was her. All it said was, "Hello, Lindsay. Nice blue hair." Since my icon at the time was of when I had bright blue hair, I told her off and then called my mother in tears. She was fuming that this woman wouldn't leave me alone, and get the hint I don't want to talk to her. All my mother told me was that she was going to settle this once and for all. Since then, I haven't gotten a message for weeks. But I know my mother didn't do anything illegal. Probably scared her off. I don't know. So long, Jessica. I never want you in my life again. Little did I know who he was. I like to divide my life into two separate times, before Clark and after Clark. In the year 2012, I started working at a corrections facility in a small town close to where I lived. The job was actually very easy, and I enjoyed my work there. At home, though, things were a bit rocky. My husband and I were fighting a lot and had finally decided to separate. I was sad, but honestly, I was more relieved. It had been causing me a lot of stress that I was venting about this guy to at work named Clark. I will say that Clark is his last name, but we all went by our last names at this place. I wanted to mention that now so there's no confusion later in the story. Clark was a really good listener. He always heard what I had to say, never pressured me into talking about things I didn't want to, offered well thought out insight when asked for, and just all around was a great friend. So it wasn't long before we started to develop feelings for each other and started seeing each other outside of work, intimately. Now before you ask, yes, I was still married to my now ex-husband, and I were no longer physically or romantically together, and Clark to my knowledge was single. Clark and I met up around 3 times outside of work, and every time we met up it was at a hotel, which I thought was odd, since he lived alone. We couldn't go back to his place. He always had an excuse why we couldn't, and I never really pushed the issue. This should have been my first sign that something was off. Over the time of us seeing each other and talking, Clark had mentioned his crazy ex to me. He never told me her name, only that she was crazy and that they had once been engaged, but it didn't work out, and they now never talk. It was nice that he was sharing his past with me, and I was in no place to judge him, so I just listened to him vent to me like he had listened to me vent to him many times before, and I felt as if we really connected. Little did I know who this man really was. It was the day after Christmas and I worked and Clark was off. We always called each other after work, so when I got to my car and turned on my phone, I was a little shocked to see I had 30 missed calls from Clark. He was drunk and basically saying that although he cared for me a lot, that we couldn't be together because he was still in love with his ex and that I deserved someone better than him. I was really confusing because we had just been friends with benefits things going on and never talked about how, although it could be nice to date, neither one of us was in a place to be in a relationship. I tried to call him, but he never answered, so I went home and went to sleep. The next day at work, I wasn't feeling well, so I asked to go home early and left 2 hours early around 10 p.m. I called Clark when I got to my car and he answered. We talked about what he said and he apologized and said that he still wanted to hang out if I wanted to, which I did. The strange thing was, we kept taking these other calls and clearly making up stories about who he was talking to over and over. I just looked over it and said it wasn't any of my business anyways. We got off the phone and I went home. The next morning when I woke up, I got a text from Clark that simply said, "Forget me." I instantly had this horrible feeling in my stomach that something was wrong. I tried to text him, but got no reply. When I got to work, he wasn't there like he was supposed to. I was worried. When I clocked in, my supervisor asked to speak to me privately. He wanted to know if I knew where Clark lived or how to get a hold of his family. I told him I didn't, as my heart sank. He said thanks and walked off. I felt sick. I ended up going back to my supervisor to tell him about the 30 text messages and how I was worried about him and if he could send someone to his house to check on him. My supervisor was really quiet and then told me that Clark had tried to kill himself last night and was in the hospital. I was shocked and heartbroken. I left work and went to go to the hospital to see him. He looked rough. He had a big bandage on his wrist and a huge scratch mark across his face, which I thought was odd. I asked him why and he said he couldn't tell me because if he then I would be ashamed to have ever even known him. I didn't know what he was talking about at all, but when I did leave, he asked me not to come back, not to call, and not to try to find him. It would be the easier way, he said. I was crushed. A couple days later, I was contacted by an investigator saying that he was investigating the death of a young woman named Cassandra Clark. As it turns out, before my friend Ryan Clark tried to commit suicide, he had killed his girlfriend by slitting her throat and stabbing her multiple times. This happened only a couple hours after we had gotten off the phone with each other that night. From what I was told, Clark was still seeing his girlfriend off and on and still staying at her place. This was because he was homeless and living out of his car, hence why we never went to his place. The nights of the murder, Clark had confessed to seeing someone else, me, to her, and they ended up getting into a physical fight in which he killed her. He's in jail now, serving 30 years for his crime. I can't begin to tell you how much this has affected my life, and how much blame I've put on myself in the past for this. If any of Cassandra's family is reading this, I am so sorry for your loss and for Clark. If there is a God, I hope he shows you no mercy. Nightmare on Tinder Street. First time poster here, so please be kind for any spelling errors and such. A bit of backstory. I was working at a small chain motel in the Midwest as a night auditor, so my hours were normally 11 p.m. to 8 a.m. With those kinds of hours and being a woman, I'm bound to have some weird stories. The scariest time I've ever had working there happened within my first month, so it was a little before my shift started, and because I was single and 22 years old, I was on Tinder before work. I matched with this guy who seems cool, a little goth alternative and into Ouija boards and tarot, which is my type, so I was hype at the time. We talk for a bit, and I tell him I have to go to work. We say goodbye. Now, that night was my first night off training, so I was running the motel by myself for 9 hours. I was already a little nervous, but then this vaguely familiar guy comes up to the front desk and asks me for my name. In my head, I've got red flags blaring at me, but this dude is weird, not by looks, but just by vibe. I tell him that I'm me, and he explains that he was the guy from Tinder, and he saw that I was less than a mile away, so he went to see if I was possibly working at his hotel. That's right, this guy was staying where I worked. Red flag number 2. I stayed behind the comfort of my desk for 2 hours because this guy won't stop talking to me, mostly about how his ex left him and how he beat people up and how he wanted to bang me. Needless to say, I wasn't comfortable, and this hasn't happened to me before in a work environment, so I did not know what to do. He finally decides to go to bed at around 2 to 3 a.m., and I take a much-needed smoke break. I go outside, and right after I spark up, guess who shows up? Creepy dude. I snooped a bit on his account, and he was a painter and was doing work locally, so he wasn't from here. He tells me about where he's from and keeps getting closer and closer to me. He asks if we can smoke weed, which I said yes to, and he'd get away from me. I showed him where the cameras weren't, and he pulled me in, spelled my neck, and started grabbing my ass. I swiftly hit him and told him he better not fucking touch me. I threw my cigarette on the ground and grabbed my phone to call my boss before going inside. Creepy dude rips the phone out of my hand and proceeds to text himself. Now he had my number. First thing he sent me is a grotesque picture of his extremely body-modded penis. I've seen some penis in my day, but it was like nothing I've ever seen. Then came the creepy BDSM porn gifs with captions like, "I can't wait to do this to you. You know what room I'm in?" Now, I'm already freaking out, and I don't know why I didn't call the cops, and my boss wasn't answering. So there's me in the back office having the panic attack of my life when I get one more video. When I clicked on it, I'll never know. I refuse to say what I saw in detail, but it was a snuff porn film, very violent, very sexual. I then locked myself in the back room, cried, and waited for a few hours before proceeding to make hotel breakfast. The text went on for days until I had enough and got the balls to tell my boss. He immediately kicked out Creepy Dude and banned him from our hotel. His company is not even allowed to book with that hotel anymore. In hindsight, I should have called the police, but I was too scared. Creepy Dude, let's never meet again. The Pacing Swords. Sometime during the years we spent in the suburbs of my hometown, my mom's ex said he needed a place to stay. My mom, trying to keep things nice between them, offered him my brother's basement room. After all, Phil slept with the rest of the boys in the upstairs bedroom next to mine and across from hers. None of us liked the idea much, but she said we didn't even have to see him. Before she agreed to let him stay with us, she stated that there were rules to follow. 1. If the police came looking for him, she would turn him in. 2. He was not allowed on the top floor for any reason. 3. He would not have people over. 4. He would not steal, or she would turn him in. 5. He would not, under any circumstances, be allowed to tell us what to do or discipline us. 6. He could not force us to talk to him. 7. He was not allowed in the house if they were out. There may have been a few others, but this is what I can remember. He agreed to all of this, and when he moved in, he of course brought all his things with him. Mom said it was only temporary, and she expected him out in 2 months. One day, about a month in, Phil saw him pacing back and forth in front of the front door, holding one of his many swords. My mom didn't know he even had swords, none of us did. But when she saw this, she ordered him to move out. She said later that she was afraid that he was planning to kill us, and trying to figure out how he could get away with it. The cops came looking for him about 4 days on a cold and rainy night. He had already cleared out. My mom gave them the honest answer that she didn't know where he went, gave them a list of people he could be staying with, and promised to contact them if she got word of his whereabouts. This all happened before the camping incident, and I believe that he was trying to put his terrible plan into action that night, as he missed his chance before. Neighbor was obsessed with my mom and broke into our house. When I was 11 years old, we, my single mom, 9-year-old sister, and 6-year-old brother, moved into a beautiful older craftsman-style house. I'd heard it was around 80 years old back then in 1984. Soon after we moved in, we found out it was infested with cockroaches. I've never seen anything like it. You turn on the lights at night and they'd scatter from every surface. We had to store all of our food that wasn't canned in the fridge, so they wouldn't get into it. We tried bug bombs and professional exterminators numerous times, with no effect. Those things really can survive a nuclear war. Anyways, they weren't the reason we lived in the house less than a year before fleeing for our lives. I just thought it was an interesting side story. To this day, roaches are near the top of my most detested bug list. I remember my mom discussing our next-door neighbor's creepy son with my grandmother. He was in his 20s or 30s. She'd been doing dishes one night and looked up to see him standing directly on the other side of the kitchen window, staring in at her. Normally, she would have kept something scary like this away from his kids, but about that time, she told us to tell her if she ever saw him near the house, that we were allowed to play outside. She also told us a couple of times when she woke up to see him standing over her bed. And about one time, he put a cloth and chemicals over her face to knock her out. This is the part of the story I know the least about, since she didn't tell us about it until years later. I think she might have thought she was dreaming, especially if he was drugging her. I don't know if anything else happened. I've never asked her about it in case something did, and it brought up bad memories. So one afternoon, we were all doing some spring cleaning, when my brother said he found a cigarette butt in the upstairs toilet. Weird. Nobody in our family even smokes. Being a dumb little 6-year-old, he flushed it before telling her mom. I still remember her trying to get the entire story out of him, being upset that the evidence was gone, and thinking he might be mistaken, or maybe he picked up a butt somewhere outside out of curiosity. She soon dropped it and we mostly forgot about it. I think it was a few weeks later, my brother was spending the night at our grandparents', and my sister and I were the only ones upstairs. Our mom's bedroom was downstairs. My sister had heard a sound like a screen door slamming, but she insisted it came from in the house and she was freaked out. I told her it was just from outside and to go sleep. A minute later, we heard a strangled cough coming from just outside our bedroom door. A man's cough, and it sounded like he was trying to keep from making noise. I whispered that we needed to get downstairs. We sneaked out of the room, and I had the irrational urge to turn on the light in the bathroom, which was just across the hall from our bedroom, to check to see if anyone was there. Then just as strong of a feeling to get away from the bathroom and get downstairs now. The scariest moment of my life was when we were creeping down the stairs in the pitch black. It was a spiral enclosed staircase with walls, the perfect place for someone to hide. The stairway light was burned out and the wood steps were creaky, so it was terrifying making our way down. We got downstairs and woke up our mom, panicked that there was a guy upstairs in our bathroom. She started to tell us to go back to bed, but could see we were seriously scared. She went over to the bottom of the stairwell to go up and show us there was nothing to be scared about. Then she had just a feeling, a very strong feeling, to close the stairwell door and lock it now. She did. Call the cops. They found nothing and didn't really take it seriously. The next day, she called a PD detective friend of hers from high school to come over and inspect the house. Remembering the cigarette butt in the toilet, she had him look at the upstairs bathroom window. It was a high, narrow rectangular window. Not very big, but just wide enough for a person. Who knows how many times the intruder climbed our roof to get inside, and was upstairs while we were sleeping across the hall. The window swung up on hinges when my mom's friend let the window drop. It sounded like a screen door slamming. He said the locks on all the windows were so old, they were practically useless, and we needed to get out of the house immediately. We moved into my grandparents' house that day, when my mom went with her brothers a few days later to pack up some things. A back door had been smashed open, but nothing in the house was disturbed. I've edited to clarify why it seemed like my mom was in denial about the guy going into her room. I'm honestly not clear on the details, since she never told us much about what she saw that night. I think she may have been out of it because of the chloroform, and maybe she thought she was imagining it. The puzzle pieces came into place after the detective checked out our house and confirmed someone was breaking in. As soon as she knew that we were in a real danger, she got us out immediately. A few weeks later, we heard the neighbor's son was arrested for rape and attempted murder. I still wonder what might have happened if I had turned on that bathroom light, if my mom didn't lock the stairway door, or if we didn't leave the house when we did. I also wonder if it's still infested with cockroaches. He lived in my backyard. Hey guys, so this happened to my roommate, and we've been scaring ourselves with stories from here. She wanted to put up her own, so here goes. I guess this all started when I was 16 years old. My dad wasn't living with us at the time. It was just me, my mom, and my sister. The property that my house was on is fairly large, with a decent sized backyard but not really usable. It also backs onto a road that's not well used by any means. As silly as this sounds, we didn't really notice anything was wrong until a family friend who was a psychic came over. She was the one who initially alerted us something being off. While at the house, she said there was a guy who was obsessed with me and only me, and had been watching me for a while, which led to a major case of the goosebumps. She led my mom and me into the backyard and showed us his hideout of sorts in the bushes between the house and the back road. There were cigarette butts as well as cans of pop or beer, I can't remember, strewn about the bushes. There wasn't really much we could do. We went back inside to chat and she left. Over the next couple of weeks, Mom and I kept an eye on it. More butts and cans showed up. We'd go out with flashlights and see someone moving around and crouching down and hiding. We'd yell at him, but again, there wasn't a whole lot we could do. We ended up having a couple of family friends come over to cut down the bushes and put up a trail cam in the backyard facing the corner of the house where my room was. At some point, I had left the house for a week or so. When I got back, there was a baseball cap, Toronto Blue Jays if I remember correctly. At least they were representing a home team, hanging on my bed frame. That was definitely not there when I left. Later, we had a male family member stay over for a bit to see if the activity would stop. It did stop for a while. My dad moved back in, didn't believe that anything had been happening, until the night that solidified everything. So to start the description of the night in question, I'll start off by saying that I lived in the basement. There was a window in my room, and in the bigger room outside of my bedroom, there was another window. This other window didn't have any curtains at the time. Where my bed was, you could see right into my room from that outer window. Anyways, on that night, I was in my room just watching a movie. I looked up and out the window. I saw something, but just assumed it was the dogs. Like anyone in a classic scary movie, I ignored it, but kept it in the back of my mind. Maybe a minute or so later, there was a loud bang in my bedroom window, and I clearly saw a boot. There was a plastic protector over the window, which broke when he kicked it, which was good, because he didn't end up making contact with the window itself. Cue a panic attack. I called my mom, who was upstairs, on my cell phone, because I was too scared to run past the window to get my mom. She ended up meeting me at the bottom of the stairs and called 911. My dad took the dogs out. They went absolutely fucking ballistic, especially around my window and the basement door. By this point, he was long gone. My dad couldn't let the dogs go in case they went off property, and ended up attacking this guy. The police showed up not long after that and checked around the house. They didn't find anything other than a broken plastic covering. They said there wasn't any point in fingerprinting anything and promptly left. We were told to call back if anything else happened. The only other thing that happened was when we were going over the footage from the trail cam, one night I saw a shadow just at the corner of the frame of the actual camera. I don't know how long he was actually standing there for, because once I saw the shadow, I stopped watching. But just the knowledge that someone was standing there was enough for me. So, guy that was stalking me, let's not ever meet. Creepy kid is stalking my girlfriend. So just some information on everyone. I'm 16-year-old kid and my girlfriend is the same age. For the story, I will call my girlfriend Kelly and the creepy kid James. So Kelly and James knew each other before I even met Kelly. James has the world's biggest crush on Kelly, and it's getting to the point where I don't even know what to do about it. So James is in 12th grade and me and Kelly are in 10th grade. James has been a fuck-up fro for a while now. He dumped his girlfriend last year to date Kelly, and when that didn't happen, he made it his mission to get her. He started out by switching most of his classes from ones she was in. Now don't get me wrong, I think James is a really fun dude. It's just that he's obsessed with Kelly. Kelly and James are friends, not best friends, but friends. We were all in marching band and stuff like that. Me and James both play trombone, so since I was around him so much, we became friends. It was pretty fun until he showed me many of the pictures of Kelly. Me and Kelly aren't dating yet. To this day, he still has almost 200 pictures of Kelly. Things only get bad from here. Now it's October and me and Kelly start dating. James gets really upset and mad at me. He starts talking shit about me to my friends. This, I don't really care much about, but then he starts telling me things. He told me a few things that he and Kelly kissed and that I should break up with her. Every time he does this, I know he is lying. Kelly isn't the type to cheat, so I confront him about it and he breaks down and starts to cry. I feel bad and just ask him to leave me alone, so he does that. But then he starts to date Kelly's best friend for about a month, then dumps her for no reason. This is when he starts confessing his love for Kelly 2 to 3 times a week. This really pisses me off. So this goes on for about 1.5 months. The entire time he thinks I don't know he has been doing this, so he is friendly to me the whole time. It's now December and I get a call from Kelly and she says, there's someone outside my house and he's been there for 2 hours? This freaks me out and I call James. When he answers, I ask him and he, without a word, hangs up. I call Kelly and ask her if the guy was still there and she said no. This makes me believe that he was watching her house that night. So yeah, that kid is really creepy and I want him to stop, but I doubt he will. I'm really scared for Kelly and I's safety. Gun enthusiast loves 14-year-old girls. This is my first post, so I hope I do alright. This story happened to me when I was between the ages of 14 to 15, I would say. Back then, I was obsessed with chat websites like Omegle and Chatroulette, etc. Bad idea in general, but you know, I suffer from a lot of boredom. One night, I met this guy who seemed really interesting. We'll call him Will. He was definitely odd, extremely obsessed with politics and gun, but I found him extremely attractive. I will tell you now, from what I know, he never lied about his age. He was 8 years older than me, and from his appearance, I believed him. At the end of our conversations on that website, he asked for my MSN, which I gave him. For the first little while, we would talk every night. I never lied to him about my age. He knew for a fact he was talking to a 14 to 15-year-old girl. He would make really weird comments though, asking me to show him my body and all that kind of unsettling stuff. Then one day, he kind of disappeared. And that's just how it worked from there. He talked to me for a week, and then disappeared into thin air. After a while, MSN became basically extinct, and I stopped using it and changed over to Skype. One day when I was 18 years old checking my email, a little window popped up. It was Will, asking how I was, what I was up to. By this point, I was in a relationship with someone else, who actually supposedly lived in the same states as him. I said supposedly on Will's part, not my significant other's. He was talking, saying that if I was ever in his state and needed a place to stay, I was welcome at his house. I replied back that if I was ever in the state, I had a place, and I really didn't need his offer. Signed off, deleted him, and that was that. I still get random spam emails from him once in a while, but never actual conversation. Weirdly enough, it seems a lot of people on his friends list are younger. You ordered a pizza, not a date with me. When I was 20 years old, so 6 years ago, I worked as a delivery girl for a pretty popular pizzeria in my area. Initially, I worked the late morning to mid-afternoon shift, but when the guy who delivered for the night shift ended up getting fired due to him losing his license because of a DUI, I was placed on the night shift, since my boss hired a family friend who could only work my shift for whatever reason. I really didn't want his shift because you never know if people who order late at night actually want a pizza or if they have other intentions in mind. Unfortunately, my boss was an asshole and essentially told me that if I wasn't willing to work the night shift, I was fired. I wasn't exactly in a position where I could be out of work, albeit temporarily, so I reluctantly worked the shift. The first month of this shift went by without any issues, until I had to deliver a pizza to a house that just barely made our delivery radius. I punched in my GPS, and the house was located in a pretty suburban part of the city. I arrived and it's about 11 p.m. The block was extremely quiet, decently lit, and mostly littered with modern townhouses, but the house I delivered to was a duplex. I ring the doorbell and wait for about 30 seconds. No answer. I ring it again and wait for another 30 seconds. Still no answer. I'm standing there getting pretty nervous that something's about to go down, but thankfully a man opens the door. He looked to be in his late 40s. He was pretty tall, maybe a little over 6 feet, but he was very skinny. I tell him his pizza is here, and he just stands there staring at me. I asked him if it was okay, and he responds by saying, "Yeah, I'm fine, sorry. I got off work not too long ago, and I'm zoning out a bit." Fair enough, I suppose. He hands me the money, I hand him the pizza, and as I'm making change, he says, "You're really beautiful, you know that?" Not really thinking too much into it. I thanked him for the compliment and gave him his change. I said goodnight, and he did too. I walked back to my car and finished my deliveries for the night. A few days later, I get a delivery order to the same place. I head over there around the same time as last time and ring the doorbell. He answers the door very excitedly and said, "Hey, it's you again, how are you?" I told him I was tired and can't wait to go home, to which he chuckled and said, "I know that feeling pretty well," as he was pulling out his wallet. As he's counting his money, he asked me what my name is. Being kinda tired at this point, and not really thinking straight, I stupidly tell him my name. As I'm making change, he asked me if he could have my number, as he'd love to hang out with someone as gorgeous as I am. Whoa, buddy, pump the brakes. I literally only met this guy like twice to deliver a pizza. I had no idea who this guy was, and I'm positive he barely knew who I was as well. Another thing to mention is that I looked way younger than I was at the time. I was told by numerous people that I still looked like I was 15, and I was hoping he thought differently and wasn't hitting on what he thought was a teenager. I'm just standing there awkwardly for a few seconds before I muster out, "Sorry, I have a boyfriend." He gets upset and says, "Oh, okay, I see." We stand there in silence before I tell him to have a good night and walk back to my car. He says nothing and still stands at the doorway staring at me, until he finally went back inside once I started my car. I got a pretty creepy vibe from this guy and even brought it up to my coworkers, and they agreed it was pretty creepy. Except my boss, who overheard everything and claimed I was making up stories and trying to gain sympathy for having to take the shift. Fucking asshole. A week later, as I'm working the night shift, and we get an order from the same guy again, and this is when shit finally hits the fan. I arrived at the house at around 10:30 p.m., and keep in mind that from my perspective on the road, it didn't look like a single light in that house was on. I got out of my car and I walked to the front door with the pizza box in my arms. As I'm approaching the door, it quickly swings open to reveal the man, except this time, he was wearing a suit and I jumped back. He laughed and said, "Oh, sorry if I scared you. I saw you out the window and figured I just opened the door now so that you wouldn't have to ring the bell." I was getting scared because, as I mentioned before, there were no lights on in the house, so he was sitting in the dark this whole time? And if so, why? I nervously laugh and say it's okay. He asked me if I like his suit, to which I said yes. He then asked me, "Would you like to go on a date with me tonight?" What the fuck? I once again tell him I have a boyfriend, to which he chuckles, gets close to me and says, Honey, there's no way a girl your age is in a serious relationship. If you go on a date with me, I'll show you how a real man treats a girl. He grabs a pizza box from me and throws it to the side, and grabs me by the arms hard. I'm officially shitting bricks at this point, and trying not to cry from the fear that was overwhelming me. I start pleading with him, dude, please, I just want to go home. I don't want to go on a date tonight. He just stares at me with the most sinister look I've ever seen on someone's face and says, I don't care. Get inside now. We're gonna have a good time. He starts trying to pull me into the house, and I'm trying to resist as hard as I can. After a bit of struggling, he lets go of one of my arms and starts grabbing something out of his pocket, which I presumed was a knife. I did something that, to this day, I'm still thankful worked as he was doing that. I used my free arm to punch him as hard as I could in his stomach. This stuns him for a few seconds, and he loosened his grip on me, allowing me to break free. I quickly run to my car, and as I get in, he runs at me and tries pulling me out the car, holding the knife in the other arm, and even yells, "Why are you making this so fucking difficult?" I grab a half-empty soda bottle I had in the cup holder and throw it, and luckily it hits him, and he lets me go. I slam the door, and then all of a sudden he jumps right on the hood of my car and starts scratching and banging on my windshield with his knife. I put the car in reverse and quickly back out of the spot, and quickly reverse down the road with him desperately trying to hold on. He's banging on my hood, screaming, "Stop the fucking car!" I turn onto the next road as swiftly as possible, and luckily he falls off the hood of my car. I slammed the gas as hard as I could to get away from that sick bastard. In my panicked state, I drove a couple blocks down the street and kept making turn after turn onto other side blocks as I feared I was being followed. Eventually, I reached a red light and I slammed on the brakes and just sat there, at the intersection, frozen from what had just happened. I began crying and violently shaking as I was sitting there. It dawned on me that I came so close to losing my life, and I couldn't help but feel like I shouldn't have been alive. Once the light turned green, I pulled over to the side and just sat there crying. Eventually, I got the energy to drive back to the pizzeria, and almost immediately after I walk in, my coworker knew something was wrong after seeing me. I practically broke down in front of him, and everyone else came to the front wondering what was going on. I fought my tears and explained everything that just happened. My coworker comforted me, and my boss surprised me and began apologizing profusely for what happened and for putting me on the night shift. He took me into the office and handed me the phone to call the cops. They arrived at the store, and I gave them my statements, as well as taking pictures of any marks on myself, as well as scratches on my car from the encounter as evidence. My coworker followed behind me as I drove home, and I collapsed on my bed, and strangely enough, I managed to fall asleep. I quit my job the next day, and luckily a friend of mine managed to hook me up with a new job at her clothing store. As far as the psycho goes, 2 days later I received an update from the police. The entire duplex was owned by the guy's brother, who lived on the right side with his wife, and the psycho lived on the left side of the duplex. I learned that he had been in and out of jail constantly at first for robberies and assaults, but later on it was for sex crimes. He had been released from jail after 5 months before this encounter for having sex with a minor. When they arrived at the house, he was long gone, and his family had no idea where he ran off to, but the police insisted they would find him. And indeed, they did, although not alive. I spent the next 2 months in fear that he would find me and finish what he had in mind, but the police contacted me and updated me on the case. Apparently, he fled to another city nearby and attempted to kidnap a teenager walking alone late at night on the street. Luckily, somebody happened to be looking out of the window at the right time, called the cops, and the police caught him trying to force her into his car. He manages to flee, but the police chase after him. He blew a red light near a busy boulevard, and a van slammed right into the passenger side of his car. By some sort of miracle, the driver of the van only sustained minor injuries, while the psycho succumbed to his wounds long before the ambulance even arrived. I thanked the officers for everything they did, and for informing me, and I walked out of the station. I walked down the street, and I light up a cigarette, as I'm taking in everything I had just been told. I don't wish death on people, but after hearing about his death, I felt relieved. I felt relieved that he couldn't hurt anyone anymore. I was relieved that I would never have to encounter him ever again, and that I wouldn't have to go through with charging him and reliving what happened that night. My last experience 2 years before this was scary, but I think this one takes the case as being the scariest, as I was alone and face to face with a psycho. Who knows where I'd be if he managed to pull me into his house. I met my cousin's almost boyfriend, a killer. So a bit of backstory. I, as of now, is 21 and still chills me to this day. This dude's name was Adam and he was something else. My cousin Sam was hanging out with this guy Adam in high school. My aunt would babysit me when I was about 9 to 10 years old, so he would come around every now and then. Even at that age, that Adam gave me a creepy feeling. I wouldn't want to be alone in a room with him, and I assume my cousin just thought I was shy. Sam's younger sister Jess really liked this guy and wanted Sam to date him. Right away, I was worried for my cousin. This guy made my stomach churn. He would always insist I sit on his lap and would try to get too close to me for comfort. At one point, he tried to let me play with his pocket knife, which my cousin would tell him to knock it off and he would put it away. I like to point out Sam would go on a walk with me and meet him up at the high school or the park, so my aunt knew nothing of this. Adam was so thin and tall with dark hair, and what I would recognize when I got older as meth mouth. My cousin was the opposite, a tall blonde bombshell with bright blue eyes. He at one point tried to get my cousin to run away with him, which I told her was a bad idea, but being a kid, I was ignored. As a kid, what I didn't know is that my cousin was stuck romance-wise between this creep and a guy named Derek. She and Derek were messing around while Sam was keeping Adam at an emotional distance. When Adam figured out, he snapped. He yelled at her and called her a cheater. I remember because seeing my teenage cousin in tears and a crazy dude way bigger than me screaming and carrying on scared the crap out of me. My cousin had enough and we headed for home. A few years passed and my cousin Sam and Derek got pregnant and got married soon after that. I casually bring up what happened to Adam when Sam was out of the room, and Jess's face kind of paled a bit. She told me that night, Adam, out of what I was anger, shot and killed his roommate. He loaded a gun, found his roommate watching TV, and shot him point blank after he complained about his parking about an hour after this explosion on Sam. We found out later that he kept his shotgun loaded and in his car, the one he drove to the park and to the school when he met my cousin. This is the story of how my cousin almost dated a killer, and just how close we were to being targets, how we stayed any longer. Super creepy friend zone killer. Let's not meet again. Religious, crazy ex-boyfriend stalks me at night. In college a while ago, I got into a relationship with a guy. He was fine until he found Jesus. He quickly went crazy, claiming demons spoke to him, trying to buy weapons from some shady friends we had, fantasizing about how he would hurt people, and becoming incredibly controlling and physically abusive, nearly killing me a few times. Needless to say, I got the fuck out. After a few threats and really crazy behaviors, he left me alone for a while, and I thought that was that. I was heading to my dorm after a meeting one night, when I decided to pass it and go to the student union, which is right down the street, to get some ice cream. As I passed the dorm, I heard steps behind me. I turned around and I thought I saw someone in a white shirt ducked behind a big signboard. I kept walking, listening carefully. I heard something move and whipped around again. There, a person, his size, staring at me from behind a tree. I couldn't see very well, but it really looked like him. I was mildly freaked out by then, but just walked a little faster. I'd hear the occasional footsteps and breathing behind me, but I didn't dare stop or let on that I knew someone, probably him, was there. I knew he owned a gun and would likely put a bullet into me given the chance. He was that psycho, and upset that I dared to break up with him. I walked all the way to the union and got some ice cream, and just sat there in the store eating. I'm willing to go back out into the unlit street in case it was my crazy, armed ex. I still hadn't mustered the nerve to head back when the phone buzzed. My heart fell out of my chest when I saw the message. It was some of my friends, a sweet couple. They had been walking way behind me when they saw someone that alarmed them enough to text me. Your ex is walking around the street. They called me before I could even text them back. Where are you? Your ex is prowling around here near your dorm. He was coming back from the direction of the union. I think he had a gun. Was he with you? What's going on? Panicked, I assured them that I had not been with him, but someone who looked like him had been following me, and I was at the union and too scared to go back alone. They practically yelled at me to stay there and not to go anywhere, and that they were coming. A few minutes later, they came running into the union, breathless. eyes wide, asking me why he was by my dorm and what happened. This was possibly what scared me the most. The boyfriend, who is a black belt in karate and is never scared, looked absolutely terrified. He was coiled into some kind of fighting stance and looking around wildly, afraid that my ex would appear with his gun. They told me they were taking me back to my dorm and calling the cops. They sandwiched me between them, and we walked back to my dorm as quickly as we dared, the boyfriend walking in front and yelling into the darkness that my ex had better not try anything. I led the two of them into my dorm and went up to my room, where my roommate put in a frantic call to the police. As we peeked out the windows, facing the street and the side of the dorm, there he was, lurking in the trees to the side of the dorm, looking up. A streetlight reflected something in his hand. Something shiny. I saw him tug at the .22 I realized he was carrying and look up. We locked eyes and I saw something. This kind of rage in his eyes that froze me. In that moment, I knew he was really out to kill me, and my friends and I had foiled him this time. He quickly turned and ran away through the tree. We didn't know whether he would come back and try to break in or something like that, so we called the police again, and lo and behold, sirens within minutes and officers with guns drawn combing the area. They caught him a few hours later. Still with a .22 in hand, he confessed he was indeed going to try and kill me if he had the chance. But he didn't want to take pot shots at me with my friends there. Apparently, since I had broken up with him, I was given over to Satan, and he had a duty to make sure I died and went to hell. Of course, he went to jail and later to a mental hospital, and I moved out of that dorm a week later. I just couldn't live with the thought that he could break out and come after me again. I got some cop friends to keep an eye on my roommates until they could move out too. I was never really the same after that. I was so afraid and paranoid for years and years. Now, I can be out and without any fear, you know? But I still have the nightmares of him staring at me through the trees, gun in hand and rage.